In this video, I'm going to talk about the BlackVue X-series feature called Native Parking Mode. I'll show you the power cabling changes made to implement native parking mode. I'll discuss the firmware settings that govern the behavior of native parking mode. And with that information about the firmware settings, I hope to answer the most common question I get about native parking mode, which is, why does the camera simply turn off instead of going into parking mode when you turn off the accessory power in your vehicle? So, let's get into it.
Parking mode on.
To fully understand native parking mode support added to most of the X-series dash cameras, let's step back and see how the cameras were powered before the X-series. Here are the box contents for the BlackVue DR900S 2-channel dash camera that I reviewed at the end of 2019. The only item included in the box to power the dash camera is the 12-volt power port adapter. If you did not require parking mode support for your installation, you could simply plug that power port adapter into a power port in your vehicle that turned off when your vehicle's ignition system was turned off. BlackVue dash cameras support a motion-based parking mode. That means if the vehicle is stationary for 5 minutes, the dash camera will enter parking mode, and when the vehicle begins to move again, it will exit parking mode. That's true of the older cameras like this one that I'm showing you on the screen and the X-series dash cameras. Eventually, the power being supplied to the dash camera will need to be turned off, and the dash camera needs a way to handle that condition. The BlackVue cameras have a supercapacitor inside of it, which stores enough of a charge to allow the dash camera to gracefully shut down. Some dash cameras on the market actually use a battery inside of the dash camera to perform that graceful shutdown function. It is far better to use a supercapacitor. It's far safer, especially when exposed to high heat. And here's an example shutdown of the DR900X 2-channel plus dash camera using the supercapacitor.
Powering down.
If you were to plug the power port adapter into a power port in your vehicle that was powered all the time, eventually that would drain the vehicle's battery. So to protect your vehicle's battery, there are a couple different options. You could use the BlackVue PowerMagic Pro, which monitors the vehicle's battery voltage level and cuts off the power to the dash camera at the appropriate voltage level or runtime. Or you could use an external Dashcam battery pack to supply that power, but eventually the voltage would run low on that, and the battery would then cut off the voltage to the dash camera. And that's why the supercapacitor is necessary to gracefully shut down in all those ways of powering the dashcam. Any dash camera that supports parking mode that's based on ignition triggered events must have some sort of access to the vehicle's constant power to power the camera in parking mode and the accessory power in the vehicle to know when to enter and exit parking mode. In the case of the BlackVue dash cameras, which are powered by 12-volt power supplies to the dash camera, a 3-wire hardwiring cable is provided with most of the X-series dash camera products. To connect the 3-wire hardwiring cable to the vehicle's fuse panel, you will need to use 2 fuse taps. The first fuse tap will be used to source power from a fuse socket providing constant power, and the second fuse tap from a different fuse socket that provides accessory power. And then you'll connect the ground wire to an available ground plug near the fuse panel or a bare metal area that will provide a good ground near the fuse panel. When connecting the 3-wire hardwiring cable to a dashcam battery pack, you must have the appropriate output cable from the dashcam battery pack, which will provide the constant power, accessory power, and ground. When BlackVue introduced the X-series dash cameras, one of the big new features included in that was the ability to support native parking mode. Some of the information in this section is taken from a BlackVue blog post related to X-series dashcam parking mode and voltage monitoring. I will have a link in the video description section to this webpage. What does the term native parking mode truly mean? The BlackVue dash camera has to be able to detect when the vehicle's ignition system has been turned off and when it has been turned on, so it knows when to enter and exit parking mode. Plus, it needs to be able to detect when the vehicle's battery voltage level has gone below the predefined threshold that you set in the firmware settings. To achieve the first objective of detecting when the vehicle's ignition system has been turned on and off, the power cables that supply power to the dashcam had to be enhanced. The older power cables had just the 12-volt power and the ground. The newer cables had to include the constant 12-volt power, a switched accessory power, and the ground. Beginning with the X-series dash cameras, a 3-wire hardwiring cable was provided in the box. Also, the connectors that plugged into the dash camera were modified to accommodate the extra power signal for the accessory power. On the screen, I have the two different styles of power connectors for BlackVue dash cameras. On the left side is the older style 2-wire DC power connector, and on the right is the new 3-wire DC power connector for the X-series dash cameras. Please note the one exception to that, the DR750X 2-channel LTE Plus still continues to use the 2-wire DC power connector. Please note that there has been a change in the way the power is delivered to the dash camera. On the older style, the ground was on the outside of the connector, where the center was the 12-volt power. On the newer style 3-wire connector, the center is the ground, and the outside section is now supplying the two different types of 12-volt power. On the left side there, you can see the accessory connector, and on the right side, the constant power connector. Please also note that the dimensions of the connector has changed as well. While both have an outside diameter of 3.5 millimeters, the inside diameter has changed. Because the DC power connector has changed on the dash camera end, both the cigarette lighter or power port adapter and the 3-wire hardwiring cable use this newer style DC power connector. Since the cigarette lighter or power port adapter can only provide constant power, it provides constant power to both of the connectors on the outside of that power plug into the dash camera. That's why native parking mode is not functional with the use of the power port adapter as the power source for the dash camera. Only when you use the 3-wire hardwiring cable to provide the power to the dash camera is native parking mode supported. If you do provide power to the dash camera using the cigarette lighter or power port adapter, you will still have the ability to use the motion-based parking mode within the BlackVue dash camera. This section of the BlackVue website page talks about the built-in voltage monitoring feature. Now that's actually a combination of features. We've talked about some of that already, where you need to use the 3-wire hardwiring cable to provide the constant 12-volt power, the accessory or switched 12-volt power, and the ground to the dash camera. And you would then connect that either to your fuse panel to get the constant and accessory power, or connect a 3-wire hardwiring cable to a compatible Dashcam battery pack, which can provide the 12-volt constant power, the accessory power, and the ground. And on the right side of this picture here, you can see that they call the feature battery discharge prevention. In the firmware settings, it's called battery protection, and you must enable that feature within the firmware settings to enable the low voltage cutoff and the cutoff timer for parking mode. Please note that the voltage cutoff values that are listed of 11.8, 12 volts, and 12.5 have been modified in the updated firmware for the X-series dash cameras. You can now specify a voltage level in 0.1 volt increments starting at 11.8 up to 12.5. I will show the setting of that value in a later section in this video. This section of the BlackVue website page discusses PowerMagic battery compatibility with the X-series dash cameras. If you have been powering an older BlackVue dash camera using the 12-volt power port output connector from one of these dash camera battery packs, you can continue doing that with the X-series, but you must use the updated X-series provided power port or cigarette lighter power plug to plug into that output power port from the Dashcam battery pack. You will be restricted to using the G-sensor or motion-based parking mode in that configuration. If you are providing power to your dash camera using a PowerMagic Ultra battery B-124 or B-124X, you can purchase an optional 3-wire output cable for that Dashcam battery pack and then splice it together with the 3-wire hardwiring cable provided with the X-series dash camera. That will give you the ability to take advantage of the ignition triggered parking mode feature within the X-series dash camera. If you're using a PowerMagic Pro right now to power your older dash camera and you want to use it with your X-series dash camera, you can certainly do that, but you are restricted in the fact that you can only have motion-based parking mode support in that particular configuration. Please don't forget, you do need to replace the older cigarette power adapter or power port adapter with the one supplied with the X-series dash camera, since the connector that plugs into the dash camera has changed. One of the features discussed at the end of this section is the fact that the PowerMagic Pro does have an on-off switch. It allows you to turn off the power to the Dashcam in situations where you don't need it to be recording in parking mode, such as parking in your garage at home. So consider that if you want to continue using it to power your dash camera, that's possibly a nice feature since the Dashcam itself does not have an on-off button. And then at the end of the website page, it discusses the compatibility with past models' power cables. We've discussed this a bit in the video already, and you can see the chart that's provided on this page. Please note that the DR750X 2-channel LTE Plus dash camera is not listed on this page like the older DR750 2-channel LTE. Both the older DR750 2-channel LTE and the DR750X 2-channel LTE Plus use the older style power connector. If you've installed your BlackVue X-series dash camera and provided power using the 3-wire hard wiring harness provided in the product box, and you notice the behavior where the camera turns off when you turn off the ignition in the vehicle, the most likely cause is the fact that you haven't enabled the battery protection feature within the firmware settings. Let's check the settings for the battery protection feature in this DR900X 2-channel plus dash camera. First, we need to connect to it over Wi-Fi. Connecting to it over Wi-Fi. I apologize for any construction noises you hear in the background. There's a home under construction across from my filming studio. Let's check the firmware settings. Since we have battery protection enabled, the low voltage cutoff feature is enabled by default with that being turned on, but you can define the voltage level for it. And right now it's set at 11.8 volts. You can change it by 0.1 volt increments. And then the cutoff timer, which is the amount of time the dash camera will operate in parking mode, can be defined. Right now it's set to off, but you can change it in 1 hour increments from 1 to 48 hours. We'll leave it at off at this point. So in this particular configuration, the camera should go into parking mode when the accessory power is removed. So let's disconnect from here. So I've disconnected from the Wi-Fi of that particular dash camera. I have my ignition switch, or my simulated ignition switch here, because I'm using a 3-wire cable to power it as if it were hardwired into a fuse box or connected to a Dashcam battery pack. And it has access to the constant power and the accessory power through the 3 connector port here and power plug. You can see that again on the outside we have the constant power, the accessory power, and the center is a ground negative connection. So if I were to turn off the ignition by turning this toggle switch to off, it should go into parking mode.
Parking mode on.
Now it would have gone into parking mode as well if the camera stayed stationary for 5 minutes, which of course it is staying stationary on this filming desk. But if you have the opportunity to connect it with a 3-wire configuration to power it for parking mode like this, you can have the battery protection feature to monitor the voltage directly in the camera, and the parking mode is instantaneous as soon as the accessory power is removed or restored. Now let's restore the accessory power by turning on the ignition switch here, my simulated one.
Parking mode off.
And if any impacts had taken place during parking mode, you would have been alerted to that as it went out of parking mode into normal recording mode. So let's go ahead and change the battery protection feature and turn that off. So let's reconnect, and we'll jump to the section where we're actually changing those settings. So let's go into the settings, firmware settings, system, and let's scroll down to the battery protection feature. I'm going to turn that off now, and even though it's hardwired the same way it was before, we'll see a difference in behavior here. So let's turn that off. Let's save that. We should get a notice here.
Settings have been changed.
So it has acknowledged the change in the settings. And I have disconnected by going out to the camera list menu. So now we're in normal recording mode. Let's see if it will be a hot change that will accept the change in settings like that. Now, again, we still have constant power, accessory power, and the ground going into that SAM cable that we were able to run this test with before. So if I turn off the power for the accessory power, but it still has the constant power. So again, we're only removing accessory power. The camera should power down.
Powering down.
So you can see from the fact that the battery protection feature has been turned off that it will power down the camera when the accessory power is removed. So that has been a common question I've been receiving when people are hardwiring using the 3-wire harness into their vehicle. They will set it all up but fail to turn on the battery protection feature in the settings, and then when they turn off the ignition, it powers down. So that's why it's powering down. I hope you found the video to be informational. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell notification to be notified when I upload new videos just like this to the channel. Check out the video description section for additional links and information. If you have a question or comment, make sure you leave it in the comment section. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.